At the hospital. She's been at PCH for 9 years. She's a proud Sun Devil. But she's from South Dakota originally. I've worked with her a few times on just some patients that I've visited. And, I know a lot of her staff, and her staff absolutely adore her. I think she's such a wonderful manager and so helpful, and just Sheila today was just saying, I just love her so much. And so, and I always hear just most positive things about our social workers and our department. So thank you for coming today and speaking to our staff about what kind of services that we can provide for our families.
Well, I appreciate you guys asking me to come. This must seem kind of different for you guys, because aren't you usually the ones doing the presentations? There's going to be differences and similarities, I guess. So I'm going to be doing the presentation. You're just going to be listening, but I will be asking you for money. So just wait it up. And as some of you here can attest, if you get me money, I will spend the money. Yay! So I have when you talk about social work at PCH, it's kind of a hard topic to get your head around. So I'm going to go through this little PowerPoint I made. It's only going to take 6 or 7 minutes. And so we'll go ahead and ask questions, whatever questions you have after that. Ask me questions. The weirder the better. I like the really weird ones. So we'll go ahead and get started. Now, because it's not, we'll see if it does what I planned for it to do. Okay, so, when it comes to social work at Phoenix Children's Hospital, every day is a different day. You never know from one day to the next what you're going to be asked to do, what you're going to be called on to do, what you're going to be facing, how you're going to respond to it. And I so appreciated coming here because I love social work. I love what I do. And so it's really a fun thing to do. So of course the sound did not come up, but what you should be hearing right now is Ghostbusters song. Who are you going to call? Social work. Something strange in the neighborhood, who are you going to call? Something just not quite right, who are you going to call? You would call us, because we're the ones who take those calls. We try to figure out what to do. Now you might all have different ideas about what they do. As you can see, there's many different variations of what people think. The physicians think we're miracle workers, by the way, most of the time. And we, of course, think that we're the people who will save the world. And we'll make it happen. And we'll do whatever we have to do. Now, there are other people who think different things, or they think you got the most depressing job ever, or whatever. But that's what social worker does. But we are not miracle workers. Even though there are times, honest to God, we can pull that rabbit out of a hat, and it seems like a miracle. And how did we do that? How were we able to put all those things together to get that family really what they needed in that moment? And it's not really as magical as you think, because it's really all about connections. It's helping families stay connected to one another, helping the family stay connected to the medical team, helping people stay connected to their community, because we aren't going to have these families forever. They need to stay connected and understand they can draw on the strength of other people in the community who can help them through whatever they're facing with their children, because these journeys are not journeys these families chose. They probably never thought they would be here dealing with this. They never thought their child would have HIV. And now their child is saying, how do I handle that? How do I manage that? Is anyone ever going to love me? Am I going to have to be able to have relationships? What am I going to do about it? Or we have families whose children have disabilities, whether they're born with the physical disabilities, whether they end up with the disabilities after a traumatic brain injury. They feel they're disabled. Our job, the beauty of our job, is to help families understand there is a future, there is hope, there is healing after these incidents, and their lives can be wonderful. We have children who need livers and hearts and kidneys and new bone marrows, and we work with those families to help them understand that the journey they're going to be on is one filled with doctor's appointments and medication regimens and costs of medical care, and also help them with the guilt, because their child is living because they got that heart. Means another child didn't survive. And how do you help families really cope with that? We get a lot of people who've been treated badly in other places, so they come to Phoenix Children's Hospital assuming they're going to be judged. And our job is to help people look beyond what they may see, to understand the compassion and dedication and devotion that people have for their children, and doing whatever they need to do for them. Even if they can't get everything they need, they're there for their children. We work with kids in the NICU. These, by the way, are my little 2 nieces that were born in the NICU 5 years ago. But these are the families that did everything right. They did all the prenatal care, they took all the vitamins, they didn't eat deli meats, they didn't smoke, they didn't do any of that stuff. Their children are still sick, and they're petrified that their children are not going to survive. They are on a roller coaster ride one day to the next. And then you can see them at the end of that journey. And yeah, maybe they're going to go home with an NG tube, and maybe you're going to do some bolus feeds. But you see the joy that these families have, that they have survived the first part of that journey with us, and they can go home with their children. And that is a great testament to part of the beauty of the work that we're able to do. We sit with children in the ED all the time. Maybe they're there because they brought their child in because they thought they had a virus, and now they found out the child has leukemia. Or the mental health issue is so vast at this point that they had no place else to go but the emergency room, waiting for a bed at another psych hospital. Or one father you're sitting with who his daughter was shot in the head by the sibling with a BB gun. We have to also work with families who maybe we're really angry at and don't care for a lot because they abuse their child. But we have to do that because we have to be able to meet with these families without judgment, to get the information we need to go to DCS and tell them what they need to do to protect this child the next time. We sit in the PICU. Maybe the child is the victim of motor vehicle accident. Maybe they've had sepsis. Maybe it's a mere drowning. It could be all sorts of things. But the families are frightened. They're afraid. They feel very alone in those environments. Maybe we give them a food card or a bus pass or something, and it's not that big of a thing, but it is a connection. Now, social workers also function at Phoenix Children's Hospital as the boundary gatekeepers. And the voice starts something like this. Phoenix Children's is a children's hospital. You may not walk around with no pants on. You may not have sex in the bathrooms when the nurses hear you. You may not fight with each other and yell the F word. So those are the fun conversations. We work with children in the HEMON clinics. And you think that it's going to be sad, but for those of us who have worked there, it's amazing the resiliency of these children. No matter the tubes, the chemo, no matter what, they live their lives each day just being a kid and playing and having the fun they can have. We also work with families whose children don't survive. And there is nothing you can really say. You can't take that pain away, particularly in that moment. You just can't. You can only just be present. And those families will never remember what you said, ever. But they will remember how you felt when they left Phoenix Children's Hospital. They will feel the compassion and the caring and the connection. Now, my guess is that you guys and social work are very similar in this way. You want to make a difference. You chose your path because you want to make a difference. We may make differences in different ways, but we could not make a difference at Phoenix Children's without all of you making the difference that you make. And it's, it's one of the beauties of what Phoenix Children's is all about. But it's a balance. We have to balance all these different things, just like you do. All the different meetings, all the different things, how we work with the families and keep the medical team happy, how we, make sure the family's not upset, how we manage calling DCS on someone when we know they're not going to like it, and our own situations and our own feelings about what we're seeing every day. And it's not easy, but I will tell you, it's worth it. So there you go. That's what social work does at Phoenix Children's Hospital. So anyway, but I will be happy to answer any questions. And I know I'm a fast talker.
Can you tell us one of the stories where you pulled the rabbit out of the hat and it was a miracle?
One of my favorite stories, because I was involved in it, right? So I remember it. So, do you remember, back, how many years ago was it now when they had the Haitian earthquake? It's been a few years, right? Anyway, so we got called by Catholic Charities because a child and his dad were being transferred. They were in Haiti after the earthquake. The father took his son to the medical ship that was there, thinking that he had hit his head on some kind of debris or something. He ended up having AML, leukemia, acute myelogenous leukemia. They air evac'd he and the father to Florida, left behind the mother and 2 other children in the aftermath of the Haitian earthquake. Well, in Florida, they have a policy that they cannot, they won't keep patients there for different reasons. Anyway, long story short, they got transferred out here to us. Well, Dr. Baldwin was the physician working with him at that time, and after we got started, we realized that he was going to have a bone marrow transplant, all these kind of things. He was still going to be very sick, and we wanted to get the rest of the family over here. Everyone told us that it would never happen. We could not do it. There was no way possible. They were on a different kind of immigration visa, and we worked on that, and now today the family is reunited in this country because we worked with the church that was over there. We got connected up to people in Homeland Security. We found, when we got through it, we found people to pay the bribes over in Haiti to get the passports. And then we got all the way down to the end, and everything was in place except we couldn't get them from Haiti to the United States. So we went through somebody who knew somebody who had a private airplane who flew his airplane down there, picked up the children and the mom, and flew them into the United States. So their first entry into the United States was riding in someone's private plane to get here. And when we brought the family to the hospital, at that point, he was very sick, and he was in the PICU, and he was intubated. And here's where the cultural pieces come in, right? So she walks into the room, and she thinks he's dead because something's breathing for him. And luckily, Dr. Beta speaks French because the family spoke Haitian Creole, but they spoke French. So at least he could communicate with them to tell her that he was not dead, he was just sick and all that kind of stuff. So to me, that's one of the miracles. The other one that I had, because I mean, the miracles stick with me because it's like you feel like sometimes you're in a place in time because you have a calling of something you need to do. I worked with another family in Hemon, because I worked for 3 years over in hematology oncology working with bone marrow transplant team. So we had a family who came in and they had not been able to have children of their own, and they were adopting a child, a family member, and then he got leukemia, and it was a very difficult leukemia. And the physicians tried everything, and it was just not gonna, he was not gonna survive. And if you saw him, he was like this angelic child in appearance. Personality-wise, he was an alien, but it's like, oh my God, that mom had the patience of a saint, is all I can say. But and of course the steroids didn't help. But when it got down and they realized, they came to terms with the fact he would not survive, the only thing they wanted was for the adoption to be finalized so that their last name would be on his tombstone. So it's like, okay, well, we've got to hurry and get this adoption finalized then, because he didn't have very long. So, but he couldn't go to the court because he was so immunocompromised at that point. So again, they say, well, so sorry, nothing you can do because no court person is going to come to the hospital. Yeah, au contraire. So, as social workers typically do, you use everybody in your environment, right? So I had sold my house, just so happened, to the administrator of the Superior Court. So I called Marcus. Marcus, here's the situation. Well, I cannot tell you, there is no judge that is going to not want to be there and do something like that. So we actually had his adoption ceremony in the Hemon clinic one Saturday morning. And he was adopted, and they celebrated that adoption, and then shortly thereafter he passed away. Now, a little addendum to that story, like I said, this is a family that had wanted children for so long and they just couldn't biologically have them. At the funeral for him, one of her cousins or whatever came up and said, I will be your surrogate. And they now are the parents of triplets. So it's like, now doesn't that feel like a miracle? And I could probably come up with a million other stories, you know, with other people. Oh, I know a better one, much more current one. But there was this little guy he was born, he ended up in the NICU. And he had been in our NICU for, I don't know, months. And his mom was not really very bonded. I mean, she was working, she had many other children, she was only in her early 20s. She had other children at home, she'd been in the foster care system herself, so she really wasn't really able to manage all the medical pieces. I mean, not that she was unwilling, but she just couldn't do it. And there was some judgment about her, but the social worker saw something in her about her devotion to her child and actually raised the issue of adoption. And they thought about it, she and the father thought about it, and they decided, yeah, we will. And so when we discharged that little guy, we discharged him to his adoptive parents. So we structured, the social worker worked with the adoption agency, found an adoption agency. They did an open adoption process, so the parents interviewed the prospective adoptive parents and selected them, and we discharged to the adoptive parents who flew out here from another state, stayed with this baby. I think he was maybe 5 months old by this time, and just stayed with him day and night in the hospital room because they wanted to spend every moment with him, because this was a family who could not have their own children and had been hoping to be able to adopt. And then they met him, they fell in love with him. And Samantha, who was a social worker, tells me this story, and it brought tears to both our eyes. But you know, when the parent decided, and the adoption worker back in and said to the family, "Congratulations, it's a boy." And that was her way of telling them that they were going to be the adoptive parents. And the parents still send us pictures about him, and talking about how much love and caring they got at Phoenix Children's Hospital from everybody, and how well he's doing, and they went to Disneyland and all this kind of stuff. So those are the kind of things that we do. And so for this little guy, you know, because I think we saw, and no judgment toward this mother who was doing the very best she could, the biological mother, what we saw is a trajectory of she won't have the resources able, she had very few family supports. You know, as you can imagine, she came out of the foster care system. It's not like she had a strong family system. So we're going to be in a situation of a rotating, okay, they're not making appointments, he's not getting his medication, now he's getting sick again, now we're calling DCS, now DCS is involved, now, you know, and this way, she does not have to feel through all that guilt. She did the best thing for him. I mean, she was courageous, this mom. I give it to her. She was very courageous because it was really hard, a lot of grief that she faced doing that because of her own experience as a foster child and her feeling her parents had given up on her. So there was a lot of that. So she did that, but this child now has a stay-at-home mom who just manages his medical care and a very large family network back there because I saw the pictures. Wow. So it just is, he's going to have every opportunity now to be well. You know, so it works out good for everyone. So see, if you keep me going, I'll be happy. Yeah.
So one of the statistics that we repeat over and over again, I think daily here, is the 57% Medicaid beneficiaries. And I assume that social work has to bear the bulk of ancillary services that those families, you know, need in order to, like you said, maintain medical benefits. You know, make sure that parents are available to get the kids to and from, that kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about just logistics of, you know, I know there's no typical scenario, but that seems to be the bulk of our
Well, that is
patient
a
pool,
lot of
right?
our patients. I think, you know, that there's, you know, pluses and minuses. So one of the things that happens for you when you're on Medicaid is you have zero medical expenses. Zero. You don't have any co-pays you have to pay, you don't have any deductibles, you don't have anything. And you have access to transportation. Not saying it's good transportation, because I think sometimes they, you know, miss appointments because their transportation doesn't show up. So the logistics with families like this, a lot of times are, and it's a typical thing, is they, you know, you know how low, I mean, to qualify for Medicaid in this state, you have to be making less than like $15,000 or $20,000 a year for a family of 4. Now think about trying to live on $20,000 a year as a family of one. So you are constantly at the margin of not being able to pay something. So even if you get your medical care paid, you know, you're still got all your other living expenses. And a lot of times these are families with multiple children and sometimes multiple young children that they're trying to care for. And there's not really daycare for them and stuff like that. So that's why you see lots of kids in appointments and stuff, because they bring them because they've got no place for them to be. So I think that the logistical issues are, how do they have a consistent, you know, housing? Where are they living and how do we help them stay in the housing they're in? And we don't have a whole lot of control over that, but we try to do what we can to try to see where there's consistency and where there might be family members who can help them and stuff like that. Transportation's a big issue. Simple basic necessities like food are a huge issue. You know, particularly if they're staying in the hospital and, you know, staying at bedside, it can get expensive. That's why, you know, I'm always calling Bonnie about, you know, do we have more money for food, you know, kind of thing. And it seems like a little thing, and sometimes it can be frustrating because it's like I don't just hand out food vouchers, but sometimes it does a couple things. It's a way to make a connection with someone, and also just to help them with a moment of respite of what they're gonna have to do. So we have bus passes and stuff that we give people, because people can get back and forth on the bus if the kid is not medically compromised. Like, let's say the kid came in for asthma, needs a follow-up appointment 3 weeks later, they can come on the bus. I mean, they get around on the bus on other things, you know, other things. We have Ronald McDonald House that we can use because families don't have the money to pay for lodging. And if you're on Access, they can bill the Access Help Plan directly. But what we see a lot of actually are the people that are kind of in that next category, where they have insurance, but now it has a really high deductible or really crappy benefits. And I see it most on kids who have mental health issues. If you're on Medicaid and your child has a mental health issue, I can get you high needs case management, I can get you people in the home, I can probably get you minimum 40 hours a week of in-home services. I can get you residential if you need it. I mean, it's a fight, don't get me wrong, with the mental health system, but I can get it. When we have these other families come in, sometimes their insurance doesn't cover anything like that. So the only thing they have available to them is go to a psychiatrist, a therapist, or put their child in a residential program. They got nothing in between to help them. So that to me is a real need. And then you have families who don't want to come in, not because they don't care about their children, but because it costs them. Think about this. Think about you're on private insurance. Your child has a very complex medical issue, or maybe like a bone marrow transplant. I'll use the as an example because I know kind of what they do. You have to come in after you're discharged from the hospital 3 days a week, at least 3, sometimes 4, into the clinic. That's another, potentially, depending on your copay amount, that could be like $120 a week, just your copays to come in to do that. Not to mention that you may have to have your kid go in and have a CAT scan or a PET scan or this or that or whatever, and that's going to cost you money too. So you're going to have other things that go. We're working with a family right now, a mother right now, whose child has, I don't know that he has autism, but he has developmental issues. She has been paying to the tune of $40,000 a year. As a single parent, it's cost her $40,000 to get him the services he needs because she's on commercial insurance and they don't cover it. They won't cover the occupational therapy, they won't cover the speech therapy, they won't cover any of that. $40,000. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I could not come up with $40,000 a year without going into some serious debt. And she's trying to keep her job, and her kid's behavior is so bad that he keeps getting kicked out of preschools, and so, anyway, so those are the kind of things we deal with, like how are we gonna help her do that? Is there some way we can get her on an entitlement program? Is there something we can look for? What can we do? So those are the kind of things that we struggle with families, or try to help them figure out a way that they can manage the journey with the resources that they have, or that we can find them more resources.
So can you give an example, like the work thing seems to me like that would be a huge, especially for single parent, if can't quit your job because it has to go to the doctor 4 times a week. So how do you navigate that or help them navigate that?
Well, part of what we do is we help them, see, sometimes when people get very much under pressure, they have resources available to them, but they're so under such stress they don't think about them. For example, we talked to the mom and she had her parents come to stay for a while so that they could take care of him at home until we could figure something else out. Now, it's an interim solution, they can't stay there forever, but we started with that. You know, at least to give her a break so we can look at some other kind of things. And then we're gonna focus on seeing if there's another entitlement program we can get her involved in. That would give her more like a Medicaid kind of support than what she has now through commercial insurance. And then really see what commercial insurance can do. And if it's a matter of sometimes it's all about how you convey the issue, the severity of it, the importance of it, and that sort of thing. And so we're taking a look at all that now. The kid was just admitted yesterday or the day before to our inpatient psych unit. So we're just starting to unravel that. So, you know, we try to get a sense of that. Sometimes we have other resources that we can help with, you know, a care fund application where it might take care of a house payment or a mortgage payment or rent or something to give a little bit of relief while we're looking to something else. So that's what we try to do. We try to see what's available already, because there's nothing, honestly, there's nothing, I mean, sometimes people are at the point where they go, I'm better off not working and just going on Medicaid because I can't manage all this, and then they work under the table.
Have you seen the kids' care legislation helping with that gap? Because that was supposed to address some of that private insurance folks caught in that middle gap part, right? Have you seen that helping at all?
Well, see what, if they qualify for kids' care, yes. If we can get them qualified. Because a lot of times families will come in with zero insurance, and then our financial counseling people look to see what other options there are. And our first, if we know they're not gonna qualify for regular Medicaid, we do kids' care the next thing. We look to make sure they're on kids' care. And sometimes we apply for kids' care even if, we always apply for kids' care or access, even if it's a gray area, thinking that we can try to get it through. No, but the kids' care fees makes a big difference because then it ups the eligibility limit so that you can get, and if you're on kids' care, you get all the Medicaid benefit. But I think part of what happened to this mom, someone along the way promised her that her kid would be eligible for Altex, which is a long-term care system. And when it was described to me, I'm like, whoever promised should have never promised that, because this kid doesn't, from my perspective, from what I know about that program, will not meet the medical requirements of the program. He's not physically ill enough. So, anyway, so now she's kind of like stuck on, well, they told me that he was gonna be eligible for that, but, so.
What's your biggest headache? What's the thing that just you keep running your head up against the wall and like, why is this happening, or what? How do we get around this, or what's the biggest thing that you're seeing right now?
You know, I think the biggest thing, the biggest annoying thing, honestly, has to do with food. I know that seems weird, but I swear to God, people come and they want, we have families who on the way to the hospital will call and say, I tell the social worker I need a food card and a bus pass on my bed when I get there. Now, which can be a little bit annoying, but these are people, you know, I always try to put in the context, they're living at the margin. And so they don't, if that $25, like, you would not believe that can make a big difference, because that's what we put on the card, is $25. So it's things like just the basic needs things that we're always struggling with, you know, how to manage that, because we're not gonna give out, you know, we're not gonna pay for people to eat 3 meals a day at the hospital, because I'll tell you, that would be a big draw, kind of. But those kind of things, having just to know, to be able to just say to someone when they came in as part of their packet, and oh, by the way, you can order 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day at bedside. Boom, done. I would get rid of a third of my social work consults on stuff like that, so they could focus on other kinds of things. The other thing that is like we cannot get around, but I don't know that we have any control over it, is the access transportation. It is so inconsistent. You know, these poor families, some of them get discharged and 2 hours later, they're still sitting in the lobby waiting because their stupid access transportation did not show up. I cannot tell you how many times that my social workers, the social workers have complained to CRS about that